Hi everyone, welcome to our online information session that's called Supporting Your Team with Anxiety, delivered today by Calm My Mind. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's lovely to meet everybody. So my name is Hayley and this is my colleague Emma.
Hi everyone.
And we are both mental health and wellbeing practitioners in the young people's team here at Conway Mind. So in today's session, we're going to start off by just explaining a little bit about who Conway Mind are and what we do. Then we're going to dive into the topic of today's information session, which is all around anxiety. So we're going to discuss what is anxiety, what might be some of the possible causes, what might it look like for individual people. So what might be some of the signs and symptoms to look out for. We're going to talk about like how do you approach having that conversation with your young person. We're going to delve into some possible coping and relaxation strategies. And then we've got some kind of top tips on how to support your young person and also how to support yourself as well. Because obviously this is a really difficult time for everybody involved, not just for that individual who's struggling with anxiety, but their whole support network. And then we're going to finish off today with some further signposting and support.
Okay, so just to introduce a bit about Calm My Mind, who we are and what we do. So it's Calm My Mind is a mental health support organisation, a charity, and it supports both adults and young people from the age of 11 upwards. And that support can include a private counselling service, which is for those aged 14 upwards, and it costs £50 per session. That could be in person in our office in Abergele, could be over the phone or by online video call. We also have some free services. So we have one-to-one support again. So supported self-help, which is guided support focused on looking at strategies to understand and cope with thoughts and feelings such as anxiety, low self-esteem, anger, and grief and loss. And there also are support calls, which are regular check-in calls with a practitioner to check in on your well-being and also to support you to work towards a goal that you set. And we do also have our Get Active in Physical Movement. So that is general wellbeing walks around the local area. So it could be up Conwy Mountain, it could be along the promenade in Llandudno. We do a range of walks to meet a range of abilities. So we do a mix of group and one-to-one support. So just to give a brief idea on the support that we offer there.
Okay, so during today's session, before we begin, we just want to remind people really that obviously this can be a really difficult topic to talk about. Anything to do with our children can be, really emotionally draining for us. So just a little reminder to look after yourself today. Obviously, this video is pre-recorded, so you can pause it at any time. If you need to go and get a drink, need to take a little break, that's absolutely fine. We're here for you. So if at any point you want to reach out, give us a call or an email. All of our contact details are at the end of this video and also in the description box below. So yeah, please contact us if you need any further support or you just need somebody to talk to about the content of today's video. And just to say as well that, today's video, there's no sense of judgment from us. We're not here to kind of evaluate or judge anybody's parenting or any decisions that people make with their children. Everybody's different when it comes to raising our kids, and that's wonderful. That's exactly what we want to see in the world. So there's no judgment here, and just a little reminder to just look after yourself the best you can today.
Okay, so now to jump into the topic of the information session. What is anxiety? So we do ask if you would like to, you can certainly pause the video here and have a bit of time to reflect yourself. When you hear that word anxiety, what does that bring to mind for you? What does that mean for you? What is anxiety? So you absolutely don't have to, but please feel free to pause the video here for a few minutes and have a bit of thinking time for yourself. And then just to give a description about what anxiety is. So it's a very normal response that humans have, and it's a way for our bodies of getting us out of danger when we may be feeling worried or scared or threatened. And some words that people can use to describe that experience of anxiety and how it feels are things such as apprehensive, nervous, sense of feeling restless and on edge, and also uncertain. There are many different types of anxiety, and this might include generalized anxiety. So that's a general sense of anxiety just in everyday, day-to-day situations and daily. So just a general sense of fear, uncertainty, and restlessness and nervousness. There are also phobias, so that's a very specific fear or anxiety. So that could be a, about a particular object, a particular place. So it could be a fear of water, a fear of spiders, snakes. So it's a specific fear. And there is also health anxiety. So that's fear around either yourself or maybe those around you, being unwell or becoming unwell, and what that might mean. And it's not to say that that's an exhaustive list at all. There are other types of anxiety. That's just to give a general idea of what some people may experience. And there is also a definition from Anxiety UK, the charity, and that says anxiety is the feeling you have when you think something bad is going to happen in the future. So having that worst case scenario in your head and that assumption all the time that something bad is going to happen. And it's not to say that it's a very normal thing for us to feel worried or anxious sometimes, something everyone will experience. It's just perhaps if maybe it's been happening for a long time, or maybe it's affecting our day-to-day ability to function, that's when we might start to consider looking for information or maybe seeing if any support is available. And again, a definition from quotes from Anxiety UK is anxiety increases when we overestimate the perceived threat and we underestimate our ability to cope with it. So again, that we have that assumption in our head, worst case scenario, and a lack of self-belief that we actually can get through that situation. We can deal with it.
Okay, so having a think now about what some of the possible causes or triggers might be for anxiety. And this is by no means, again, an exhaustive list. This is just the kind of things that, Emma and I see in our day-to-day jobs with young people. This is some of the kind of things that we might see. So first of all, that sense of school pressure, working our way up through the different school years. Exams are looming. There's a lot of pressure to kind of hit those top marks. And yeah, when we think of school pressure, we might be tempted to just think of academic pressure, kind of all the stuff around the exams and going to lessons, but there's the social side as well. So, worrying about who am I going to see at school today? What's it going to be like to be in those really built up busy areas? So like walking down the hallways, going to class, going into the canteen can be really frightening for some people. So just that sense of that school pressure as a whole, and just recognizing, how much time young people spend at school versus the time they spend everywhere else in their life. School is a huge part of young people's lives, and that can be a real trigger for anxiety. We've got physical changes as well. So, we all know when we hit adolescence, our bodies just transform. And sometimes that can be really unnerving and really unsettling. We don't know what's happening. We're having these huge surges in hormones and new experiences, new emotions that we've never faced before. And that can be really anxiety provoking. Things are happening within us. We feel different, but we're not really sure why. And yeah, it's such a huge transformation, for us as parents to watch that can be really unsettling, but to actually go through it can be very, very frightening. We've put down about life events, big changes. So, whether that's moving house, moving school, any kind of big change can really pull the rug out from beneath us. And sometimes even situations which on the surface might be really positive, such as, a new baby coming into the family. That's a wonderful situation, but it can still be very anxiety provoking because it's just that sense of change, and we all kind of really enjoy, and some of us really thrive on having a sense of routine. So if that routine changes, yeah, we can really feel like quite uncomfortable with that. We've got kind of that sense of future uncertainty as well. So obviously adolescence is a time when we're starting to leave the kind of relative safety of childhood, and we're starting to come into adulthood now and really becoming aware of the world, starting to question, who am I? Where is my life going? What am I going to do in my life? Even down to what lessons am I going to choose for my, year 9 options? What am I going to do when I get to college? Am I going to go to uni? All of these big questions that we've never faced before, suddenly they're looming in our lives when we become teenagers. So that those bigger questions about life can be, quite anxiety provoking for people. We've also got trauma as well. So that could be something such as, maybe childhood trauma, really difficult situations that we've been through when we're younger. Or it could be something like a car accident, for example. Those can be some really big triggers for anxiety. We've also got a genetic predisposition. Now, there is some research to suggest that people with a family history of anxiety might be more vulnerable to also feeling these kinds of emotions themselves. So this is sometimes called anxiety sensitivity. But whether or not that anxiety sensitivity is because of genetics or whether it's because of kind of learned behavior, we're picking up on other people's coping strategies, it's not really clear. So there isn't really definitive research that can fall down on either side. We've also put relationships. So whether that's family, friends, romantic relationships, adolescence and teenagehood is a time when the people around us mean so much. So whether it's having arguments with siblings, like we say, starting to have those first romantic relationships perhaps, and I'm sure we all know as parents, those things that happen with our friends where one day our children are in a really, really tight-knit friendship group. Our friends mean the absolute world to us. We'd do anything for them. We'd go everywhere with them. And then, a couple of days later, we have a massive argument. It's the end of the world. Nothing feels like it's ever going to be good again. And then a couple of days later, we're back to being best mates again. So that sense of kind of relationship uncertainty, that can be really difficult during adolescence. We've also got kind of bullying and peer pressure. I'm sure any of us that have experienced bullying in our younger years will still remember it now. It's so painful and it can really have a huge impact on us. Sometimes people see it as, it's part and parcel of childhood. There'll always be people in school who we feel uncomfortable around. But what we tend to say to people is imagine if, as an adult, we had to go to the office every day and there was somebody there who was making us feel really uncomfortable, who was bullying us, just how painful that would be. So just to kind of keep that reminder, and that perspective on how difficult bullying and peer pressure can be. And finally, there might not always be an obvious or a clear reason. As Emma was saying before, with that sense of sometimes generalized anxiety, where it's kind of like bubbling under the surface all the time. We feel really anxious, we feel really unsteady, we feel really nervous about everything, and we just don't know why. That can be anxiety provoking in and of itself because I feel this way, but I don't know why. So it's almost anxiety about anxiety. And sometimes mentally, it can be easier if we can pinpoint to a certain reason and say, this is the thing that's making me anxious. But if we can't do that, then that can kind of contribute and keep that ball rolling of anxiety. So yeah, as we say, this is by no means, the definitive list of what causes anxiety, but this is just some of the stuff that we kind of see in our day-to-day jobs.
Okay, so again, we invite you here to pause the video if you'd like to have a think about what anxiety might look like for someone who's experienced it, how they might behave, or what they may look like, what that might look like. So yeah, feel free to pause the video here if you'd like to, and have that reflection time. Okay, so again, just some general ideas of how it may impact and what it might look like for someone experiencing anxiety. So it can affect many different things, so our emotions, our feelings, how we behave, the thoughts that we have, and also our physical feelings as well, our body and how that feels. So in terms of behaviours, we may start to isolate ourselves or withdraw ourselves from those around us. And we might stop doing activities we used to enjoy and instead maybe close ourselves off in our room instead and spend a lot of time in there. We may also find that we have a change in our engagement in school. We may have previously been really motivated and enjoyed learning at school, and now we just find it really difficult to focus. Maybe we're missing homework, and we just don't want to attend, and that change in lack of engagement. Um, also some thoughts that we may have. So it could be feelings of feeling really restless and on edge. So constantly having that sense that something is going to happen. I need to be prepared, something's going to happen. Um, and just not being able to just be in the moment and relax. And with that, we may also actually just want to escape the situation, just run away, just get away, don't want to deal with it. Let's just leave the situation and leave it behind, just escape. And finally, also physical feelings. So we may notice that maybe our heart starts to beat a bit faster if we're feeling a bit more overwhelmed or anxious. We may also notice our breathing might change. We might start to take really short, shallow breaths, be really, really fast. And again, it's not to say that that's absolutely what it will look like for someone experiencing anxiety. It's a very individual, personal thing. This is just a general idea of just things made to look out for, if of what it might look like for someone. And again, like I said before, it is absolutely normal for us to experience anxiety. It's just if perhaps it's affecting our day-to-day life and routine, maybe it's repeatedly coming back, or maybe it's been around for a long time. It may be then that you start to consider reaching out to someone, maybe if you can.
Okay, so during kind of any discussion of anxiety, and kind of what it feels like and why it happens, you might come across the phrase fight, flight, or freeze. And this phrase is really and really important and a really interesting way for us to kind of conceive of how anxiety happens. So in our brains, there is a little part of our brain right in the middle. It's a little bean shaped called the amygdala. And the amygdala is responsible for keeping us safe. It makes really fast decisions on how to get us out of dangerous situations. And that is wonderful. If we're in a dangerous situation, then it will do its best to kind of get us out and to keep us safe. Now, this is a really old part of our brain. It's our survival instinct. It goes way back into, when we were cavemen. And that was wonderful back then. But what's happened is over time, as we've grown and we've developed and we've changed as humans, that amygdala hasn't really changed at as fast a rate as the rest of our brain. So it still works in quite an old way. Which, like we say, was great when we were cavemen and we had, tigers to fight off and all these scary dangers. It kept us safe, it kept us alive. But in the modern world that we live in, we're not fighting those kind of dangers anymore, but our amygdala is still responding in the same way. So that's why something as simple as doing a phone call, going to a meeting at work, if you're an adolescent and you're in school, going into the school assembly hall, that's why these kind of things can be so strongly overwhelming and anxiety provoking. It's because our amygdala is recognizing this is a bit of a scary situation, right? I need to do my best to keep us safe right now. And it's having these really fast automatic responses. So when we're having these kind of automatic fast responses, they tend to fall into three different categories. So the first is to fight. Now, when this response is triggered within us, we're going to be feeling really angry, we're going to be feeling really energized, we're ready, we're going to do something. The kind of thoughts that we might be having would be, it's all their fault, they shouldn't have done that. And behavior-wise, we're going to be seeing lots of kind of like outward emotions. So raising our voice, showing aggression towards people, especially people in authority, and blaming other people. So for example, say we had a teenager who was in class, and the teacher kind of points at them and asks them to answer a question. In that moment, the amygdala is triggered. This is frightening. I've been picked on to answer a question. Quick, respond, respond. If we go into the fight response, the kind of behavior that we might see would be them retaliating maybe against the teacher, maybe having a little bit of attitude towards their teacher, raising their voice, being really a bit confrontational perhaps. If somebody's automatic flight response is triggered, then in this situation, they might be feeling quite anxious, quite panicky, thinking, I don't want to talk to them, I need to get out of here, I need to go back home, I've got to do whatever I can to just get away from this situation. Behavior-wise, in that response, people might avoid people, they might avoid the situations on purpose that are making them feel really anxious. Sometimes people might just walk away with no warning whatsoever. So either distracting or distancing yourself, anything you can to get out of that situation. So again, going back to the teenager in class, if they're asked to answer a question and they go into flight mode, they could just get up out their seat and just walk out. No conversation, no kind of communication. I'm out, I'm gone, I need to get out of here. And the final automatic response that we might see is to freeze. So in this situation, we're overwhelmed, we're numb, we're in total shutdown mode. We're thinking, I cannot physically do this. Behavior wise, again, we might see people just immediately giving up, immediately stopping what they're doing. They might come across as perhaps a bit spaced out or being silent or ignoring the situation. So again, that example of in class, teacher kind of asks somebody to answer a question and they just completely blank. I'm not listening. I can't hear you right now. I'm not going to respond. I've frozen up. This is my response right now. So sometimes when these things happen, we can be really confused. Like, why did I behave like that? Why did I feel that way? And just knowing that it was the amygdala, it was our brain desperately trying to keep us safe in a situation that we had deemed frightening or that we had deemed dangerous. That's why these automatic responses happen. And that's why sometimes we can act so out of character when we're in these kind of really anxiety-provoking situations. So all that being said, obviously, as Emma said before, it's completely individual. So what anxiety looks like for somebody, what might cause it, how somebody copes with it, will be completely different for everybody. So it's just being aware of those individual nuances that come with every individual person.
Okay, so again, this is a point where we invite you to pause the video in a minute if you'd like to. And this is to have again a bit of a reflection time about how you'd feel with a hypothetical scenario that we're going to share with you and see how you might approach it, knowing what you know now and what we've discussed so far, seeing how you might approach the situation. So I'll read out the scenario and then we've got some pointers of some things that you might reflect on, some ideas of things you might think of. So the scenario is your team has always been a worrier, but you've noticed that they've become increasingly tense and restless lately. They put up a fight when it's time to get ready for school. In fact, they put up a fight when it's time to go anywhere. They seek reassurance from you that everything will be okay, but even when you give them reassurance, it doesn't seem to help for more than a few minutes. Excuse me. If plans change, or if they don't know every detail of plans, then they find it really hard to go with the flow. One day, they tell you that they've got a tummy ache, and their heart is beating really fast. You ask what's wrong, and they burst into tears, telling you that they feel scared of everything and they can't stop worrying. So that's the hypothetical scenario and some pointers that we've got you might reflect on with that scenario. So the first question might be, what would your initial reaction be if your young person, your teenager, was to say something like that to you, they can't stop worrying? What would your reaction be in that moment? How confident would you feel dealing with that sort of situation and circumstance? How would you feel emotionally? And how confident would you feel dealing with that? And what would you actually say to your team? How would you approach that? What would you say to them at that point? And how would you be feeling? Having heard that your team say something like that, how would you be feeling? And also, how do you think the teenager, the young person might be feeling, having actually made that step of sharing that with you? How do you think they might be feeling? And also, you absolutely don't have to stick to those points. Is any other thoughts you feel you might have? Hearing and reading through that scenario, what do you think about that? So any other thoughts that you might have. So again, please feel free to pause the video here and have a think through that situation.
Okay, so now we're going to have a little think about some negative coping behaviors that people might implement when they're feeling anxious. So naturally, kind of when we're feeling anxious, we might do anything we can to get rid of these feelings. So we want a fast fix that's going to kind of give us that sense of immediate relief. Now, short term, this might be really helpful because we can get rid of those feelings as quickly as possible. But long term, we're teaching ourselves that we are not capable of dealing with these kinds of emotions. We're not capable of feeling them. And we're teaching ourselves that it's not okay to have these kinds of negative emotions, such as low mood and anxiety, when actually those kinds of difficult emotions are completely natural and it's part and parcel of life and growing up to experience these kind of things. But when we push them away, we never give ourselves the chance to learn that. So, some possible negative coping behaviors that people might implement to get that fast fix. Rumination. So this is where we end up thinking, if I just think about this situation long enough and hard enough, I will be able to think my way out of it. But all that ends up happening when we ruminate is we have this spiral that goes down. And before we know it, time has passed and we've just been thinking and thinking and thinking without coming to any sense of resolution. We're not actually thinking of solutions. We're just really sucked into the thought stream. Reassurance seeking. Now, this is when we ask other people for constant reassurance that everything's going to be okay. Am I going to be all right? Is this situation going to be okay? Can I go to school today? And we do that in the hope that it will alleviate that sense of anxiety. And again, we might get that short, sharp hit of reassurance, but that's only temporary when that happens because we are not dealing with the underlying issue. We're just kind of putting a stick in plaster over it again and again by getting that little hit of reassurance. Distraction, and the example that we've given is with social media. So, keeping our minds constantly busy so that we don't have to think about the issues that are kind of making us feel really anxious. We don't have to engage with what's going on in our minds because we're constantly, always keeping ourselves busy. Use of substances, so things like alcohol and drugs. And obviously, this goes without saying that, any kind of hit of, relief that we get from using substances is only short term. And all we're doing is paving the way for kind of issues with addiction, more physical and mental health issues that go alongside any use of kind of substances. And finally, avoidance. So it's completely natural to want to avoid things that make us feel uncomfortable and that make us feel anxious. And as parents, we might really have that urge and that impulse to keep our children away from things that make them feel anxious. But there are obviously a few kind of problems with this. So, in terms of the downsides of avoidance, what we find is that life gets smaller and smaller. So living a full life means riding the ups and downs and everything else in between. We want our young people to have multifaceted lives where they are experiencing the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's really what we want in life. But when we avoid doing the scary bits, what we tend to find is that life gets smaller and smaller, and we're not allowing ourselves to fully take part in our own lives. Again, when we avoid things, we teach ourselves that we're not strong enough to deal with certain situations. Whilst it's understandable that there will be situations in life that we all find overwhelmingly anxiety provoking. So, for example, for me, the thought of, say, doing a skydive is terrifying for me. So I'm going to avoid that like my life depends on it. And that's absolutely fine because that's one particular thing that I'm really frightened of. So I avoid it. But when that avoidance starts to permeate the rest of our lives and it starts to spread into other things, that's when we're starting to reinforce to ourselves, that we're just not strong enough to deal with these situations. And we're getting that mindset of, I'm not brave enough, I'm not strong enough, I can't deal with this. And we just keep reiterating it to ourselves over and over again. We know with avoidance that it spreads. So as life gets smaller and smaller, the avoidance gets bigger and bigger. And when it spreads, it can be really insidious. So we might start off feeling, quite frightened about perhaps going to maths class because that's the class that we feel most unsure about. We've always really struggled with that subject. So that's the thing that kind of triggers the anxiety and triggers the avoidance. We don't go to maths class because it makes us feel uncomfortable. Before we know it, all of a sudden we're feeling the impulse to avoid. Actually, it's not just maths class, it's science class as well. Actually, walking down the halls in school is really, really hard. So I'm going to start implementing my avoidance as well. Going into the canteen, going into the school assembly hall. Avoidance can spread like wildfire. It can go really, really quickly. We reiterate to ourselves as well when we avoid things that uncertainty and the unknown just can't be tolerated, when actually a certain amount of uncertainty is part and parcel of life. We can never be sure of everything that's coming down the road. It's just not possible. But when we teach ourselves that absolutely, I cannot tolerate any uncertainty, I need to know absolutely everything, and that is not achievable. So that sense of avoidance is again reiterating to ourselves, I need to know everything. If something is unknown, I cannot tolerate it. And finally, when we avoid things, we never get the chance to learn healthy coping strategies and to prove to ourselves that we're brave and strong and capable. You know, the work that we do, one of the best parts of this is when we have somebody who is absolutely adamant that they cannot go in and do this exam or go into the assembly hall. They go and do it and they come out absolutely buzzing because they have learned that actually they're a lot more capable than they gave themselves credit for. But when we avoid all of the hard bits of life and all of those anxiety-ridden situations, we never get the chance to prove to ourselves, I did that. I really did that. And I was able to do that. And we don't give ourselves a chance to feel proud as well of, what we're actually capable of doing. So whilst avoidance might seem like the obvious solution to anxiety, all of these downsides kind of show that when we remove ourselves from these situations, we're getting that initial hit of, oh, thank God I'm not there anymore. I don't have to deal with it. But all of these downsides can really mushroom. And before we know it, all of these things happen and we're starting to really sense that we're pulling back from life. We're not giving ourselves the chance to celebrate our own abilities and to feel proud of ourselves.
So, building on that idea of avoidance, we're just going to take a real life example and show what avoidance will look like in that situation. So if we take the idea of having lunch in the school canteen and taking those negative coping behaviours that people may turn to. So if it's rumination, so like we said, it's that idea of if I think about it long enough and hard enough, I can fix those feelings and change what's like how I'm feeling and what's going to happen. So it could be constant thinking all the time and kind of what is for lunch, who's going to be there, where am I going to go, what's it going to be like? Is it going to be really busy? And that might impact, say, our motivation to go to school. It might impact how we sleep. We just have that constant thinking and worry about what's going to happen at lunch. And also, we may have reassurance seeking. So again, frequently asking questions about lunch, whether it's what time is lunch today? What is lunch today? Where are we going to go? Who am I going with? Who's going to be there? And again, it's that no matter how many times we ask and the reassurance we get, it doesn't change that sense of nervousness. And we may also use distractions. So it could be, if we use the example of social media, it may be, for example, instead of going to the canteen and connecting with others or spending time with friends, we decide we're going to isolate ourselves and spend time on our phone, on social media, perhaps in an empty room, maybe outside on the field, in the library, in a quiet space. And so we're going to spend that time instead of being with others, we're going to just be on our phone and go through social media. And finally, avoidance. Again, it may be we walk past the canteen, and we just have a glance in and we see, oh goodness, how many people are in there, maybe what it is and who's there. We decide, no, absolutely not going to deal with it. We're just going to walk straight past and go to another space again, whether that's an empty room, a field. We're just going to completely miss that and just es escape and go to a different situation. So one way of perhaps working, managing and dealing with these feelings is something like gradual exposure. So it's that idea of making a real small, gradual steps plan. Um, and using the idea of a ladder, I've shown on the screen. So it's thinking about the steps you can take to get to the top of that ladder. And the top of the ladder is your main end goal, the thing you really want to achieve. So could we do really small steps? So if we take, continuing that example, having lunch in the canteen, it could be, so we may plan, okay, I'll just see how it feels to be in that space, just get used to being in that space in general. So you maybe plan when the canteen is empty, you go in there, maybe it's by yourself or with someone as support, just seeing how that feels, actually being in that space and getting used to being there in the canteen. And then you may take the next step of then alternating. So you might actually have something to eat, but you still have that outside. But then maybe you have spend a bit of minutes in the canteen. Maybe you have a drink afterwards in the canteen, say for 5 minutes. And just again gradually get used to actually consuming something in the canteen and being in that space again. So maybe alternating. And then again, you may take another step of making a plan with friends and actually deciding, okay, where are we going to go for lunch? When are we going to go? Arrange maybe, if you can, arrange maybe where you're going to sit at the table. And so you have that reassurance, okay, I've got a plan, I'm going to have support there. This is when I'm going to meet my friends and what we're going to do and see how that feels. And then you may actually then build up to eating something small in the canteen, just a quick snack, build on that next step of again consuming something a bit more, spending a bit more time in that space. To then reaching the end goal, which is eating full lunch in the canteen and having that full lunch time in there. And again, it's not to say that it will be a smooth process going through that step by step, and that's what will happen. You may end up bouncing and going between them all and mixing that up. So maybe you go from alternating eating lunch outside, having a drink afterwards, to then eating a snack in the canteen, and then you may go back to actually going in when it's empty and getting used to that again. So you may alternate between them all. It may not be a smooth, gradual process through it all. And that's absolutely okay. It's what you feel is possible and what works for you. And that sense of feeling uncomfortable, unfortunately, is something that will be part of this and is okay. It's just that sense of learning that if we can get through and live through that uncomfortable feeling, then it gradually over time with practice, it can get a bit easier. So it's just an idea of something that maybe able to plan either together or the young person can plan themselves, that that ladder, that tiptoe plan of what they may be able to do to help themselves in that situation.
Okay, so kind of as parents and guardians, we might be starting to have an inkling that something might be going on. We've kind of started to think, yeah, I've noticed a couple of these signs and symptoms. But how do we approach having this really difficult conversation? So we've got a couple of hints and tips. So first one, pick the right time. This would be the absolute biggest piece of advice that we could give. It's going to be a really difficult conversation, and there might be some emotional fallout either from your young person or for yourself as well. So just picking the right moment is key. It can be really tempting when, say, in the mornings, anxiety is running high and we just want to go, oh my gosh, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Just recognizing that that's probably not the best time to be having that kind of conversation. Sometimes it's letting the dust settle, recognizing, okay, let's take a step back and we're going to put time to one side to talk about this. Using normal everyday situations and activities. We always say things like taking the dog for a walk, going for a drive in the car, anything we can to make it normal, to make it really comfortable, to make it at ease. That sense of kind of like sitting down at the kitchen table for a serious conversation, that's going to be really overwhelming for everybody involved. So just trying to make it as chilled as possible. And obviously, there will be moments when your young person might come to talk to you and you're just not able to have that conversation at that moment. And that's absolutely fine. That happens to the best of us. But when that happens, just reassuring them that, I do really want to have this conversation with you. I know this is really important. Right now is not the right time. However, I'm going to make a commitment that we're going to talk at tea time tonight, or we're going to talk at bedtime, or we are going to go and take the dog for a walk and we're going to talk about it then. So just making that commitment so that they know that you're not ignoring or you're not kind of fobbing them off. You're going to sit down and have this conversation together. Sometimes it can be really helpful to use, examples from TV and films as a really good conversation starter. So we can do that in a really indirect, kind of softly sort of way, just by saying, oh, I've noticed that such and such a character looks like they're going through a bit of a tough time at the minute, doesn't it? I hope they reach out. I hope they've got somebody to talk to. Or we could be more direct and say, that character really looks like they're struggling with anxiety at the minute. And you've said that you're feeling a little bit nervous and a bit anxious too. Are there any similarities there? The way that you're feeling. Do you feel like that? Do you feel different? So using that as like a little prompt to get the conversation going. We, at the end of this and in the description, we'll give you a link as well to the Young Minds website. They've got some fantastic conversation starters on there on how to kind of get these talks going. And sometimes it can be just as simple as, what you're listening to at the minute, what you're watching on YouTube, and just using that as that conversation starter to just get the topic going. Because yeah, we know that talking to teenagers can sometimes be really difficult at the best of times. So yeah, anything to kind of softly starting that really gentle conversation. Having done all of those little tips, you might still find that it's really difficult and there might be some barriers that would make it hard for your teenager to open up. So we just kind of wanted to run through some of them just so that you're not feeling deflated or frustrated if you've tried everything and it still feels like you're not getting anywhere. This might be some of the reasons why. So even though, as a society, I think we're doing much better in terms of kind of stigma around mental health, but there is still a lot of shame and embarrassment that can go with struggling with our mental health. Sometimes it's easier to kind of say, oh yeah, I'm really comfortable with mental health. If somebody is struggling, I'm really open to that. But to then turn that in on ourselves and to actually be the person going through that, that can be really, really difficult. It can still feel really embarrassing. It can be really hard to actually say out loud, like, I'm really struggling right now. So that might be a barrier, perhaps, as to why your teenager is finding it so difficult to talk. They might be feeling guilty. One of the things that we hear so often is, I've got no reason to feel like this. They might be worried that if they tell you how they're feeling, you might feel guilty yourself that, what have I done as a parent? And they don't want to make you feel bad. We hear that a lot of the time, this sense of, I don't want mum or I don't want dad to worry about me. So, that sense of worrying about the guilt, that could possibly be a reason why people find it so hard to open up. A lot of the time for teenagers, there's a real fear and uncertainty of, if I have this conversation, what happens next? So just making sure that that is part and parcel of the conversation, that you're addressing those fears of, okay, thank you, for telling me this. Right, what do we do next? Let's decide between the two of us, where are we going to go from here? Sometimes we don't know how we feel. Sometimes we just know that something isn't right. I don't feel like my normal self. I don't feel good right now, but I'm not sure why. I can't really pinpoint it. And there's that fear that if we can't find the right words, then it's like, oh, I might be misunderstood. I might describe it in a way, and that's not really how it feels. It can be such a huge thing to try and break down and to try and verbalize that sometimes we just get completely stuck in it just becomes silence. It's like, how do I do this? How do I put this huge thing that feels really woolly and feels really confusing? How do I find the right words for it? And that can make it one difficult to talk about it. And finally, sometimes people can have a fear of losing ownership of a situation or that sense of control in their life. So sometimes when we keep our mental health or our well-being struggles to ourselves, there's a sense of it's mine. I can hold it. I can keep it in check. I can control it. And there's that fear that if we give it out to other people, all of a sudden I'm not in control anymore. Somebody else is going to come and take over this situation. And it could be something as what might seem so little, but if I tell mum, are they then going to go and tell dad or vice versa? There could be that fear of I've told dad, and now all of a sudden my brothers and sisters know, my auntie knows, family friends know. So just that thing around like it's mine, I can hold it, it's personal and private, and that fear of opening up and giving something away that is so personal, that can be really scary for a lot of people.
Okay, so just to go into now some ideas around strategies to be able to cope with those feelings of anxiety. So one way is that idea of expressing feelings, and actually having an output for those. To appreciate sometimes it's so easy for it to just build up and snowball inside us. So having a way to express and have an output for that can be really helpful. So absolutely, it could be that you say write a journal or a diary and use words and write it out, say pen to paper or maybe typing on a phone or a laptop. But we also appreciate that it can be difficult sometimes to explain or express our thoughts and feelings in words. And sometimes just knowing what words to put, we like we said, we may feel something's different or something's wrong, and we just don't know why and how to actually pinpoint that and explain that. So it could be that maybe it could be you do that together with the young person does it themselves. Maybe it might be you say do some drawing, some colouring, it may be use Play-Doh, clay, whatever you think might be possible. Just a way to, as I say, an output for those thoughts and feelings. And also at this point, it can be important to have a conversation with the young person, actually and giving them control. So what do they want to happen with that piece of writing, that piece of art? What do they want to happen with that once they've finished? Do they want to keep it to themselves? Would they want to share it with someone? Do they want to bin it, shred it? What do they want to do? So again, giving them that sense of autonomy, that sense of control, they can decide what happens with this and having that personal space to express those feelings. And one important thing, we've spoken before about really small, gradual steps, because we appreciate that taking that first step of saying how we're feeling can be incredibly difficult. So it can help to build that motivation by doing really small, gradual steps. And also just going back to really basic things and focusing on those instead. And it may sound really simple, but sometimes just taking those small starting steps can really help. So those things it might include those small foundations include eating. So are they eating enough in the day? Are they eating at all? Has their eating habit changed maybe recently? Maybe are they eating less, eating more? Has that changed at all? And the same with sleeping. Do they feel they're getting enough sleep or a deep enough sleep, a quality of sleep? Has that changed recently? Just seeing, do they have a routine they follow at bedtime to be able to build that space, a calm space where they can get to sleep? And exercise and movement, it doesn't necessarily have to be exercise. It could be, are they actually going outside and getting some fresh air in the day or during the week? How is that working? Use of social media kind of who are they messaging or spending time with online? What are they doing online? Are they gaming? Are they on say on social media platforms? What are they doing on their phones? And how often they're using it? Has that changed recently? And again, build a routine. Do they have a routine at all? Say things that hobbies that they do or things that they do during the week. and maybe groups that they join. And or maybe has that changed again? Has that stopped at all recently? Have they said they're not interested anymore, they don't want to do it and isolating themselves? And are they actually connecting with others and socializing? That could be in school, but also maybe out of school. It could be even be just family and friends. Are they speaking? Are they spending time in the living room, in the lounge in the evening? Maybe are they having something to eat with you and just spending a bit of time? Are they connecting with others? And again, we appreciate this can sound really simple, but just taking those small steps can sometimes improve our well-being gradually and increase that sense of motivation. And these are also things that we look at as practitioners when we have that initial conversation with the young person just to see what's going on for them. Questions we ask around what is sleep like for them? Can they get to sleep? Can they stay asleep? Um, what do they do in their spare time? Do they have any hobbies? Are they spending time with friends? So these are things that we ourselves ask the young person and talk about with them. And it can be an indication that maybe something's changed for the young person, something maybe isn't quite the same, maybe not quite right.
Yeah, so as Emma was just saying, when we're getting to know a young person and we're working with them, sometimes it can feel for them like it's this great big huge um melting pot of all these things that are going on, and it's really difficult to almost like pull out the individual threads. So sometimes when we're working with teenagers, we might invite them to do this kind of activity, either in a session with us, or they might take it home and do it during the week. But this activity is really good at just starting to recognize and identify what are the types of anxious and negative thoughts that I'm having. So we might ask people during the week to, if they come across certain situations that are really triggering for their anxiety, to pop them down into this kind of diary. So the example that we've got here, so the situation we've put is, a friend invited me to go to the cinema. Our initial gut reaction in that situation might be, I said I was busy when really I wasn't, I was just at home. Then we'll invite people to start to think, okay, well, what's underlying that reaction that I had? Why was that my gut reaction was to just say no? And in this instance, the negative belief underlying it might be, I thought that if I went to the cinema, I might embarrass myself, I might spill my snacks or my drink. So just starting to take these really big woolly situations that feel really complicated and just breaking them down into their individual parts, just so that we can see them a little bit clearer. And once we've recognized and identified what these thoughts are, then the next step might be, to try and challenge them. So questioning, what is the likelihood of you going to the cinema and spilling your drink all over yourself? Have you ever done that before? Have you ever seen someone else do that before? Um, and if that actually did happen, okay, let's have a think about how would you deal with that? What might be your reaction? What might be everybody else's reaction? If you spill your drink everywhere, what's the likelihood of your friends all turning around and kicking you out of the cinema and never speaking to you again? The likelihood of that is actually quite small. So let's process that. Let's think about it and use that evidence that we've got to try and challenge that anxious and negative thought. Another really nice little activity that we might do sometimes is all about evidence. So what evidence do we have to disprove the anxiety? So in this instance, the anxiety is saying, if I go to the cinema, I'm going to embarrass myself, right? We need evidence for why that thought is wrong. And some of the evidence that we've got is, I've gone out to the cinema tons of times and I've never spilt my drink everywhere. I've gone out with my family and nothing went wrong. I've been out with my friends and nothing went wrong. I've been out and maybe a little thing happened that I wasn't really comfortable with, but guess what? I dealt with it and I coped with it in that moment. So showing ourselves, using evidence to show to ourselves, we can deal with these situations that we are so afraid of. So, another really good way of kind of implementing coping strategies is all about kind of relaxation and looking after ourselves, that sense of self-care. So obviously when we're feeling anxious, one of the things that goes with that is lots of tension. So we tend to tense up, our heart rate is going 10 to the dozen, we're breathing faster, we're breathing more shallow, everything is really, really tight. So when we work with teenagers, we will invite them to take part in these relaxation activities with us, just to try and teach them these little coping strategies, so that when they are out in the world and they come across difficult situations, or they get that flood of emotion, they've got some little coping strategies that they can use. So we have got links to kind of demonstration videos for all of these relaxation strategies, which we will put in the description box for this video. But this is a really nice little activity that we do with teenagers. And it's a nice mindful breathing activity. It's a really good one because people can do it in school, they can do it in class. People hardly ever notice that, you're doing it. And it's basically just popping your hand up, taking the finger from your other hand, the bottom of your thumb, and just breathing in and breathing out, breathing in and breathing out, and just following that pattern of your finger as you're breathing in and out, doing it as slowly and deeply as you can. It's such a good breathing technique because not only are you going to get, 5 really good calming breaths, but that little bit of touch can be really good for grounding you and kind of coming back into the present moment. So this is a really nice little technique that we teach. Another kind of breathing technique is all about kind of square breathing. So we'll invite people to kind of imagine a square, starting at the bottom left-hand corner of it. So to breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4 seconds, and hold it for 4. And to keep on doing that square with our breathing, doing it as many times as we need to, before we start to feel relaxed. Sometimes people will kind of trace their finger as they're doing it. Sometimes people might trace their finger on their hand. Sometimes people will use their phone and just kind of like go around the outline of their phone as they're breathing in and out. Another really nice little technique that we teach, and this one maybe not to be used in class so much because it does look a little bit funny the first couple of times you do it. And again, we've got a demonstration video in the description below. But using your thumb and your forefinger to alternate breathing between different sides of your nose. And the pattern that we're going for is to cover this side, breathe in, switch, breathe out, breathe in, switch, and breathe out. So kind of that upside down V kind of shape. And this is a particularly good technique to do at bedtime. It can really help to kind of get off on a really good night's sleep. So yeah, this is another little technique that we'll teach teenagers.
Okay, so another thing that we also talk about is grounding techniques. So it can be so easy to live life on autopilot, just getting through day to day, doing what we need to do. We're not actually paying attention to who and what's around us. So this is looking at helping us to bring ourselves back to the moment and actually just think, okay, what is around me right now? Whether it's if you're in a space by yourself or walking to and from somewhere, it can be used in everyday situations. And it's looking at the 5 senses. So sight, sound, smell, touch, hear, the sound, and just picking up actually, okay, what is around? Is it trees? Can I hear birds, see birds? Is anyone walking? Traffic coming by me? Is anyone walking by me? Can I see any dogs walking? Just trying to pay attention to those senses a bit more and bring ourselves back to the moment. We also have muscle relaxation. So, like Haley said earlier, the fact sometimes when we are anxious or overwhelmed, we can become really tense and hold our bodies in quite a tense way. And we might not even realize it that we're doing that. So this is to build on that idea, and it's going through different areas of your body, tensing it, not too hard and not too long, say for 10 seconds, and then releasing that. So it's that idea of deliberately tensing something, releasing that tension, letting it go, and just thinking about how does that feel different? Does it feel different from when you've deliberately tensed a part of your body to then when it's relaxed? Could even be imagining throwing those worries, those thoughts away, those feelings away. You're throwing that out of your body. So it could be putting your hands into fists, say holding that for 10 seconds, and then just relaxing your hands, letting them go, just letting them drop. It could be lifting your shoulders up towards your ears or putting your face into a frown. Again, just for a few seconds and just thinking about that difference of how it feels after your body's been tense to then when it's relaxed. And finally, sometimes we speak about relaxation breathing, and which it might sound really simple again, but that's sometimes simple things can really help. And sometimes, and if we do get distracted during these strategies, it's absolutely okay. And just try and notice where the thoughts have gone, and then bring ourselves back to the activity if we can. And sometimes with something like breathing, it can help to have something that we can think of, something more concrete to help us maintain that activity and keep going. So with this, it's an idea of a balloon. So we imagine that our stomach is a balloon. And each time you take a deep inhale, you breathe in deeply, the balloon inflates and gets bigger. And every time you exhale, take a deep breath out, the balloon gets smaller and deflates. And it's just paying attention to how your stomach moves every time you breathe in and out, and how that balloon inflates and deflates, and how that feels.
Okay, so just some little pointers now, some little tips on kind of how to support your teenager when they're struggling with anxiety. So first and foremost, just that kind of sense of an open door of communication, and just that reassurance that you're there for them. We all presume as parents that, our kids, they know that we're there for them. They know that we love them and that, there's no sense of judgment, but sometimes we just need to hear it. So yeah, just kind of reassuring them, I'm here, when you need to talk, you can come to me, I'm here. And building on that as well, that sense of being a listening ear, and it's okay if you don't have all the answers. I'm a firm believer that it actually helps to build trust if you turn around and say to your teenager, do you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but let's find out together. Should we go and have a look on the computer together? Or how about we go and speak to somebody else together? Because it shows that you're human too, and you don't have all the answers, and that's okay. It's all right to be like that. But you're in this together. The two of you are a team against this anxiety, rather than it being you versus them or us versus them. We're in this together. Going back to what we were saying before about that sense of that fear of losing control, really putting them in the driving seat. So asking them, what do they want from this conversation? How do they want you to approach things moving forward? Do you want me to check in with you tonight? Do you want me to check in with you at the weekend? What's going to work best? And having that flexibility and kind of recognizing that if they feel empowered and in control of the situation, it's probably going to go a lot easier. And there's always as well the option to speak to the GP about how you're feeling. They are the best source of support and referrals. And if there is the possibility that a referral could be made to another support service, such as CAMS, for example, or any other support service, just being mindful that sometimes those waiting lists can be really long. So if that's something that's on the horizon, we would always recommend trying to get that referral done as soon as possible, just so you're chipping away at that wait time. As well, talking to them about what we call their backup team, which just basically means the people in their lives, who are there, who is in their life, who can they talk to? If for whatever reason they can't talk to you, say you're in work or, whatever, who can they turn to? Does their auntie know? Does their brother and sister know? And as well, external organizations. There are some brilliant organizations available for teenagers to talk to. So yeah, just kind of exploring that together. And as well, it sounds so obvious, but just taking an interest in all aspects of their life and not making every conversation about their mental health. Sometimes we worry that if we talk about our mental health, it's going to become a thing and it's going to become this really big part of who we are and how people see us. So, yes, talking about our mental health is so important, but it doesn't have to be the be all and end all. It doesn't have to be the content of every single conversation. So just seeing them in a broader sense of, what music are you into? What are you watching at the minute? What games are you playing? So just kind of seeing that bigger picture. And obviously, you can always check in with school as well, just to see, have there been any changes at school? Have they noticed anything? Is there any extra support perhaps that school could offer? And again, kind of going back to that sense of external support. So there are talking therapies available. So things like school-based counselling, other organisations that can provide support. It could be medication perhaps from the GP. So yeah, just kind of having those conversations to see what's available and see what's out there.
Okay, so Zane spoke there about how to support the young person, the teenager, but also we appreciate the big part that you all play, parents and guardians. So it's really important that through this time you have a way to support yourself as well. So just going to look a bit around how you can support yourself. So firstly, self-care can be so important to have that bit of space for you as well, something you enjoy, or just to relax and just to be, just to sit down, have a warm drink of tea. So just that idea of self-care, and just having that space for you whenever you can. Also, it could be that yourself you access support organisations, like maybe it's Common Mind or maybe others. Just the fact that looking at support organisations and having that individual support for yourself if you feel that would be useful. And again, speaking to others, whether it's family, friends, work colleagues, maybe it's staff at their school. Just that idea of, again, having that output for you, someone you can connect with and share these feelings with. And it could be, again, speaking to your GP if you feel you're struggling with mental health as well and it's having an impact on you. The main thing, or one big thing, is just the idea of self-kindness, self-understanding. Absolutely, it can be so easy. We place a lot of expectation and pressure on ourselves to be doing the right thing, saying the right thing, we should do something now. But absolutely, as Haley said before, just the idea of sometimes all that's needed is just to be there and just to listen. Sometimes it's all that's needed. It's not an action or something needs to be done. Just that idea they know you're there and you listen. And absolutely, we're all only human. We can only all try our best. And like you made the big step of watching this webinar, and we really appreciate you taking the time to do so in the step you've taken. So just that idea of self-kindness, we're all just human, we're doing the best we can, and that's all we can do.
So there are some other really amazing organisations who we would love to tell you about and kind of signpost you towards. So as we said before, there is the Young Minds website, a fantastic resource, and they also have a parent helpline that's available Monday to Friday. All of these links will be in the description below. There's also the Charlie Waller Trust, which is an online parent support network, and that can be really helpful just to kind of meet, speak with other parents who are going through similar things, just to kind of, reiterate and remind you that you're not on your own in this. Childline is available as well, as is an app, I should say, called Kooth, which is a really lovely app that you can download onto your teenager's phone, and it's full of kind of all mental health related tips and hints, videos, message boards, all that kind of thing. So that might be a nice thing to check out. And there is also a text line that's called Shout 24/7. And with this text line, you can text it any day, any time of the day or night, and there will always be somebody on the receiving end to text you back. So yeah, all of those details are in the description below.
Okay, and just finally to see around the next steps. So, if you do feel that you need any crisis or immediate emergency support, then please just contact one of the organisations on the screen there. So, emergency services like police 999. There are also helplines, which is Samaritans, again, which is open all year round, 24/7, all day, all night. And the numbers on the screen, 116123. There is also Papyrus, which is specifically focused for young people up to the age of 35. Again, they're open from 9 a.m. till midnight, and you can either email them or you give them a call, and parents can call them as well if you're concerned about a young person. So just some helplines that you can contact for immediate support if you want to speak to someone. Excuse me, and just to say, finally, thank you so much for watching and taking the time today. And if you feel you would like any further information about, say, what we do, Come Mind, or about anything that's been said in the webinar and the information session, then please just get in touch with us at Come Mind. Our contact information is out on the screen. And we also have our website online. But yeah, absolutely, just Diolch, and thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.